Another school campus in America targeted by a mass killer.
We do know from Las Vegas police this is a confirmed active shooter. An awful scene playing out today in Texas. An active shooter for a time in an elementary school. Multiple children have been killed.
We have a problem with mental health illness in this community.
People make comments like, oh, well, it's mental health issues. Right now, guns, the most lethal of all consumer products, are the only products that aren't even subject to consumer safety regulations.
I think mental health plays a role in every part of our lives. So I think it's a terrible misconception to match these kinds of shooting situations with mental health versus guns. It's not mental health versus guns is the wrong discussion to have.
In 2023, there were 640 mass shootings in the U.S., according to the Gun Violence Archive. The growing number of mass shootings has sparked repeated calls for gun law reform, along with other calls for increased mental health resources.
No one, as a 5-year-old, says, I want to grow up to be a mass shooter. It is a debilitating situation that occurs over time.
Last month, our hearts were shattered by news of the monstrous attack on a Christian elementary school in Nashville that claimed the lives of 3 adults and 3 precious children. This is not a gun problem. This is a mental health problem.
The vast majority of people who perpetrate mass shootings do not have some sort of serious mental illness. And in fact, the majority of mental conditions do not increase the risk of violence. And we see that with mass shootings. The number is not 0. A few percent of mass shootings, like we discussed, are related to mental illness. But well over 90 and 95 and even 96% of mass shootings are not related to mental illness.
When I led the FBI's program, we did the initial research on 14 years of shootings. When you look at who commits violence and why, in 2020, we have 48,000 firearms deaths in the United States, and about 28,000 of those were suicides. And the majority, the largest group committing suicide with a firearm are rural males, men who choose or cannot find mental health care.
90% of murderers are male. Men are much more violent than women. Men tend to see violence as a means of control.
We found that the average age of a shooter was 35. And what that tells us is that the shooters are dealing with a lot of life stresses that a lot of us deal with, and they're not coping with it.
The deceased suspect in the UNLV shooting, sources say, had applied for a college professorship at UNLV, but he was not hired.
They tend to have lots of failures in lives. Failure at work, failure in relationships, failure in school, and their ability to cope with life's frustrations begins to wear thin. So they're ready to take their own life, and many of them do. But first they want to get even with the people they hold responsible.
There has been a dramatic increase in the amount of anger and violence that's taking place in America. And what Texas is doing in a big-time way, we are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it.
When we conflate mass shooting and mental illness together, we stigmatize the mentally ill. Their rate of violence is actually lower. They're more likely to be the victims of violence, not the perpetrators.
The vast majority of people with mental illness are not violent. If you look at the overall population of people who commit mass shootings, a small percentage of them have identifiable mental health histories.
Survivors of previous mass shootings have called for gun law reform, but experts say solutions to mass shootings take time, as there are several solutions to consider.
We have a president who realizes that thoughts and prayers alone are not enough. A president who has been standing up to the gun lobby for decades and winning.
In 2023, the Biden administration launched the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, providing cities and states with supportive resources to help them advance their own efforts to reduce gun violence.
The biggest challenge for us in America is that it's not a single cause, and we're always looking for one solution that doesn't exist.
We have to sometimes push back on these talking points that elected officials are putting out, reducing the cause of the mass shooting down to our cause, which is mental health and mental illness.
The rate of public mass shootings in the United States versus the rest of the world, and we do have more than our share, at least 4 times the rate in the US than the rest of the world. Certainly, a good reason for that has to do with weaponry. As many as half the guns in this world are possessed by Americans. We're the ones with all the guns. And were it not for the guns and certainly the powerful ones, the AR-15s, for example, we wouldn't have this kind of a problem.
Enough is enough! Not one more student!
We are impatient when it comes to giving that law or policy a chance to run its course through a few years to see if it reduces gun violence.
Preventing mass shootings may also be a consequence of improving mental health services, but we certainly don't think that improving the mental health system is going to prevent every future mass shooting from occurring, because it's a complex issue that requires complex solutions.
That is the biggest struggle, is that we want an answer right now. We're in an answer right now society, and we don't take the time to say, let's pass this law and see if it works. Let's pass this policy and see if it works. And we're not really going to solve things, unless we take the time to see whether or not what we put into place in the Jenga puzzle of laws and policies that are put into place make the difference.